CFA exam results season has been in full force this week, and we're getting generally positive news if you're a CFA candidate hoping to pass these things in the future. The November 2022 pass rates for the Level 1 and Level 2 exams have been released. The Level 1 exam showed a pass rate of 67%, which is just in line with where it was at the beginning of 2022. The Level 2 exam's pass rate rose a little bit from the last two sittings up to 44%, which also puts it right back in line with where we were at the start of that year. As of the recording of this video, the official pass rates for the Level 3 exam sitting from November last year has not been announced yet, but I'm assuming that it's going to follow suit generally with what we've seen from the Level 1 and Level 2 pass rates, as the Level 3 exam has been doing in recent history. If you're watching this video and you recently got a pass result for any of the three levels of the CFA exams, congratulations are certainly in order. I have always said and still maintain that passing the CFA exams was probably the biggest accomplishment of my life at the time and will always remain as one of the top 5 accomplishments for as long as I live. It's easy in the years after passing exams and certainly becoming a charter holder to let the significance of what you had to do to get there sort of fade away. And it's almost inevitable that that will happen. So I would encourage you to spend some time, even a day, relaxing and reflecting on what you've accomplished, what you and your brain have achieved that many human beings will never even pursue in terms of academic challenge, and congratulate yourself. It's just worth celebrating, at least with yourself, for a little while. There are 2 reasons I say these results are generally positive if you're a CFA exam candidate. First of all, the Level 1 pass rate is starting to march up back towards historical norms if you average out the results throughout 2022. We've finally gotten what I'll call a full cycle of exam sittings throughout last year of candidates whose studies had not been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic that the CFA Institute still claims had so much of an effect on passing rates throughout 2020 and the early parts of 2021. So what that means is we should have a pretty good representative sample. Even though some of the sittings had very low participation rates, at this point we should have a good sample, and to see that Level 1 pass rate slowly inching back up towards historical norms means that the CFA exams are not impossible feats like it looked like they may have started to have become throughout late 2020. You know that especially if we can get right back up near or exactly to the historical average pass rate, it's about the same challenge it's been throughout most of history, such that if you were a candidate who got interested in this exam in 2017, 2018, 2019, you are now back to an environment in which you may have expected. You know, when things got extremely difficult in 2020 and the pass rates plummeted, a common argument was, I would have never signed up for this if I had known this is what it was going to be. So with this getting back towards a historically average number, it is more of what you maybe expected it to be. It is more of a potentially unimpossible task and something that I think a lot of candidates should be encouraged by. Now, the second and potentially bigger piece of encouragement for CFA candidates is that the estimates on the minimum passing score in the Level 2 exam have sort of plummeted when you compare to relative minimum passing score changes throughout the last 15 years since 300hours.com has been making the estimates. The Level 2 minimum passing score estimate dropped so drastically that it is almost back down to the levels that it was at in the summer of 2017 when I passed the Level 2 exam, when the estimated minimum passing scores were the lowest that they've ever been for that test. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but that's where they were. I'm happy that I cleared it back then. But here's the point. Even though the pass rate remained constant from the beginning of 2022 to now, the minimum passing score estimate was much lower, meaning that assuming the institute is following their criteria correctly, a lower minimum passing score resulting in an equal pass rate means that they are evaluating the difficulty of the exam questions appropriately, understanding that the average question asked on this November 2022 sitting of the Level 2 exam was more difficult than we've seen over the past 5 years or so, and appropriately adjusted that minimum passing score much lower to say that, yeah, these questions were real tough. Maybe you shouldn't have had to necessarily answer quite so many correct to still meet the JQC, the justly qualified candidate, I think it stands for, criteria that the Institute sets their standards by. And that's a good thing. Again, for that pass rate to remain constant, I think the Institute should feel like they're doing a good job. You should feel like they're potentially doing a good job at appropriately evaluating the relative difficulty of all the questions asked on that level 2 exam. So for anyone who wants to become a charter holder, yes, I know many of you are level 1 candidates. You're going to have to take that level 2 test. And just to see the Institute making such a huge reduction in what we can estimate that minimum passing score to have been shows that they're taking their job, I don't know if seriously is the right word, but they're approaching it in the way that we would hope in an instance where they potentially wrote more difficult exam questions. Now, it's not like it's easier. I'm not saying, hey, they cut it way down, you're in luck, this is going to be easy. Because again, the overall pass rate stayed the exact same from the beginning of the year till the November sitting, aside from a dip in the middle of the year. But it just means that they're going to be reasonable with you. And we likely shouldn't see a pass rate of like 50% or lower on the level 2 exam again, just because they potentially wrote much more difficult exam questions and failed to reduce the minimum passing score to a lower hurdle to reflect that, which is what many of us sort of believe happened throughout the end of 2020. Even though we know the Institute says it's just because you all didn't study good enough. So this whole thing seems to me like the direct result of the Institute not taking the route they did throughout 2020 and just saying, hey, sorry, you should have studied better, and actually being realists with this and going, oh, shoot, these exam questions were probably really hard. We should lower that minimum passing score. And that's what they did. That's really where, if I was a future level 2 candidate or a current level 2 candidate and having to take the exam again, I would go, okay, I know that they're willing to work with me here. I know that there's still a really high bar that I need to clear to be a just qualified candidate or someone that the CFA Institute deems to be an extremely educated analyst worthy of the CFA letters. It's still a high bar, but it's not going to be some crazy unrealistic metric, at least not based on these most recent past results. Like I mentioned, my assumption is that the level 3 overall pass rate trend will be similar to that of level 1 and 2, which is that it was relatively constant from the beginning of 2022, potentially slightly higher, in the positive direction of candidates and future candidates. So overall, this should be relatively good news to you. Of course, if you failed, it's going to be devastating. It's going to take some time to reflect and decide what you want to do in the future. Congratulations again to everyone who passed. And let me know in the comment section down below what worked for you. Love hearing about cases where someone watched a video and said, oh man, I should memorize the formulas like AJ and like Mark Meldrum had said, and then narrowly passed maybe because of that. It's a lot of fun for me. So drop those encouraging things down below if you have them. And as always, thanks for watching.